Mark Cancian is a retired US Marine colonel and senior advisor at Washington's Center for Strategic and International Studies. Good to see you. Are we seeing any real progress in talks towards a ceasefire?
Unfortunately, I don't think we are. The two sides have been talking for many weeks, but they're far apart and their desires appear to be irreconcilable. That is, the Israelis are willing to trade a temporary ceasefire to get back their hostages, but they're not willing to stop the war. They're not willing to withdraw. Hamas wants the Israelis to not just have a ceasefire, but to withdraw from Gaza. Then they'll release the hostages. They know that the hostages are their ace in the hole. There doesn't look to be any compromised position. And that's just in the short term. There's also a question about long term. What's going to happen to Gaza when the conflict either hits a ceasefire or simmers down? No one wants the Israelis to stay in Gaza. In Gaza, the United States doesn't want to go in, but it's very hard to get any Arab coalition to move in.
You mentioned the United States, and we've seen an increasingly strained relationship between Israel and the US. How do you see America's role in bringing an end to this conflict?
The United States has really a bifurcated approach here. On the one hand, they're pushing very hard for a ceasefire. They're trying to send in relief supplies. Of course, they did not veto this last ceasefire resolution in the UN. On the other hand, the United States has continued to ship weapons and munitions to Israel to allow them to continue fighting. The United States would really like this to be over. Is trying to facilitate a negotiated settlement, but that doesn't look to be tenable.
Let's talk about those huge protests against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Do you think that this internal pressure in Israel is going to have any impact?
Well, as the correspondent said, that's unlikely. Netanyahu, of course, is facing strong opposition for his mishandling of Israeli security and allowing October 7th to occur. Even before then, Netanyahu was a very divisive figure. He barely squeaked out a couple of elections. On the other hand, the Israeli population is adamant that they want this threat to go away. So whoever replaces Netanyahu, if it comes to that, is going to go ahead with the war, could even be more hardline.
And then, of course, we need to think about the long-term impact of this conflict and the displacement of millions of Palestinians. How do you anticipate the region's going to manage this?
Well, clearly, they're going to have to come to a settlement to allow internal, movement of the refugees. No one's going to take the refugees. Egypt has been adamant they're not taking the refugees. Of course, the Israelis won't take the refugees. They're going to have to come to a settlement that allow the refugees to find places within Gaza. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen in the near term. We're probably going to see more fighting around Rafah. Maybe longer term, we'll be able to put together some sort of agreement, maybe after the capture of Rafah, but there are lots of obstacles.
There are lots of obstacles. So if you were at the negotiating table, you were part of those ceasefire talks, what would it look like to you?
Well, I would certainly want to keep the discussions going, because one side or the other might hit the point where they're willing to make some serious concessions. That is, the Israelis may face enough external pressure, may decide that they've hurt Hamas enough that they're willing to have a ceasefire in place. And it may be that Hamas is hurt enough that they decide that an in-place ceasefire with maybe some long-term peacekeeping force might be acceptable. Neither side is at that point now, but we might get there. And we want to have ongoing discussions so that when the two sides get to that point, they can quickly come to an agreement.
Mark Cancian, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on the show.